close your eyes and picture a red apple. Now, is the apple that you're picturing actually red? For most people, the answer is, yeah, of course, that's what you asked me to do. But others might say, well, I don't actually see anything. No one sees something, right? And that is because some people don't have or use visual imagination, or what's sometimes called the mind's eye. And those folks can be kind of surprised to learn that it's not just a metaphor. This condition is called aphantasia, and it was only really noticed by the scientific community in 2010. But aphantasia is more than just a different way of experiencing the world. It's also a new window into how the brain processes imagination, emotion, and even memory. Broadly speaking, the scientific community first really learned about aphantasia after a man had what seemed like a small stroke and lost his ability to create visual imagery. After his story was covered on the news, 21 others contacted the original researcher to report similar experiences. Only for them, life had been that way as long as they could remember. As scientists studied these folks, they found that aphantasia falls on a spectrum. Some people report their visual imagination as just being less vivid, making them less likely to use it. Meanwhile, others seem to be unable to make visual imagery at all. If you were to ask a person in that second group something like how many windows there are in their home, they wouldn't picture every room. Instead, they would likely say they used knowledge or memory to answer your question. At first glance, it's tempting to chalk this up to miscommunication. Maybe what someone with aphantasia calls memory is actually what others might mean by mind's eye. But experiments have shown that there does seem to be something going on at a physiological level. For example, most people with sight experience an illusion called binocular rivalry. If a researcher shows each eye a different image, the brain can get overwhelmed and sometimes just ignore one. Like, say I flash red horizontal stripes to your left eye and green vertical stripes to your right eye. The odds are pretty good that your brain will just randomly pick one of those to focus on. But let's say you don't have aphantasia. If I tell you to visualize red horizontal stripes before the experiments start, you're more likely to see red than green. But if you do have aphantasia, the results basically stay 50-50. That suggests that the folks with aphantasia really do have less of a mind's eye. It's not a miscommunication. Now, as for why aphantasia happens, the discovery is so new that we really don't know yet. This idea is so new that we're not even sure how to pronounce the word yet. I say aphantasia, other people say aphantasia. I think aphantasia sounds better, and if we are collectively right now in the process of deciding what the pronunciation is, we should go with the cooler sounding one. But we're also not sure if it's something genetic that someone is born with or a trait that's acquired early in life. One thing we do know is that damage to the brain can remove some ability to generate visual imagery, like in that first identified case. More specifically, some patients who have acquired aphantasia later in life had damage in one of two key regions, either the occipital lobe, which processes visual input from the eyes, or the parietal lobe, which is responsible for keeping track of where things are in space. But there are also plenty of people with aphantasia who've never had any kind of brain injury, and looking at their brains has told us how they compensate for not having a mind's eye. Overall, it seems like these folks do it using brain areas including the anterior cingulate, which helps us identify errors or inconsistencies. This might help explain why these people perform just fine with memory tests like remembering facts or recognizing which images they've seen before. And a preliminary study from 2020 offered some insight into how this might work. The study involved 61 people with aphantasia, and the researchers asked them to study photos of different rooms in a house, then recreate them from memory. The participants generally used less color in their recreations, and on average, they remembered significantly fewer objects in the scene than a control group without aphantasia. But they were just as accurate with where they put those objects, and also had fewer mistaken additions that weren't in the original pictures. To do all this, they seem to make use of verbal scaffolding, or descriptions that helped them remember what was in the images and where. The researchers found that people with aphantasia also put more text on the drawings, and that they described storing the pictures as words and descriptions. Finally, studying aphantasia has also helped scientists realize that emotion can come from just visual imagery. Like, pretty much every person with sight gets a bit startled when they see a scary image. And researchers can quantify that reaction by measuring a change in how the skin conducts electricity. That's because you sweat a little more when you're stressed, and sweat conducts electricity better than dry skin. One study found that people without aphantasia can get a similar fear reaction just by reading a story designed to evoke vivid, scary images. But people with aphantasia don't respond that way. This means that emotions might be more connected to visual imagery than we realized, which could change how we think about improving mood and well-being. Overall, aphantasia has been a striking discovery, not only because it's teaching us things about the brain, but because it's a reminder of how different our everyday experiences can be from one another. Many with aphantasia don't realize for years or ever that they're experiencing the world differently. And these differences aren't a bad thing, but they are important, and the more we learn about them, the more we can understand what it's like to walk in each other's shoes.
A few days ago, I found out that not everyone has an internal monologue. So what I mean by that is, like, they can't hear their thoughts, which I didn't believe to be true until I asked someone, and they said that if they physically wanted to say something in their head, they'd have to say it out loud. Like, they couldn't do it. They don't have that voice that I thought everyone had. So it blew my mind, and I wrote an article about how it ruined my day, and a bunch of people read it and came at me with all these questions that I'm not capable of answering because I can't even wrap my head around it. So I decided to do a Q&A with someone that doesn't have this internal monologue, so hopefully she could answer your questions because I still can't function. Here we go. All right, so I found out a few days ago that not everyone has the ability to speak in their brain, and the first person that I asked if they could do it was her, and turns out she can't. So I asked a bunch of people to ask me questions so I could ask her so she could try to make light of this wild situation. So like if you look, like I could look at myself in the mirror, talk in my head without opening my mouth. You physically can't do that.
No.
And what would happen if you tried to do that?
I have tried to do that since learning that an internal monologue exists, and I end up speaking out loud to myself. So most of my conversations are out loud.
I feel like this information to the people that can think in their head is a lot more like exciting news. I've talked to a few people that can't do this, and they seem less enthused as the people that do have this internal monologue.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm very confused as to why people are so perplexed.
All right,
by
so
it.
the probably most requested question was, how do you read? Like when I read, I hear the words in my head. I don't know how you could possibly read without not hearing the words.
When I read, I can see the sentence structure. Like in my head, every sentence has a shape, so you can see like the shape of the sentence. And then also like keywords will pop out, and I can file those away into my like concept map. So at the end of reading something, I can have a concept map of the main topics that I read about. And I tend to move my lips when I read. So like essentially I'm saying it out loud, but it's just not like audible.
So do you visualize the setting when you're reading a book?
No, it's not like images. It's just the words.
So do you like reading like fiction books, like where you have to put yourself in a situation?
I never really enjoyed reading.
At
all?
all?
I think maybe that's why. Like I can see the story plot.
Are you a fast reader?
Yes, very fast reader.
We could have a 100-question test. She's done when I'm on question 12. I'm not even kidding. It is superhuman. It's not fair. How do you know what you're thinking if there's no words?
Because I can see it.
I think that's why this whole thing is going viral, is because people like me can't understand how you get through a day without talking to yourself.
I don't know. I just feel like the information is in there, and I can pull it forward if I wanted. Like it's all just like it's like files. There's categories of information in my head, and I can pull them to the front if I need them. But
I feel like I could do that. Like if I'm studying, I could like pull things out. But just like if I'm sitting and like I have a thought, or someone is like walking by and I have a thought about that person, I'm like talking to myself about that. Does that not happen to you?
no. If I have a thought, normally I say it out loud.
I can't do this. Do you daydream often?
No, never. Hardly ever. I can't think of a time that I've daydreamed, I don't think.
Do you dream at night?
Yes.
And are they normal dreams? Do you hear dialogue in those dreams?
I don't think so, actually.
Do you enjoy being alone? I like this question.
Yeah, I do.
So, like, if you don't have anything in front of you, like no stimulus, what is going on in your head?
Oh, I always have to be doing stuff. Like, if I'm alone, I'm cleaning, I'm cooking, I'm, like, watching Netflix, I'm studying. But I hardly ever just, like, I don't just sit there alone.
Do you have any theories on this yourself? / do you even care?
I don't
It
really
seems
care.
like
This feels really normal to me.
I can't even do this because I can't wrap my head around this. But she is so nonchalant about it, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't
You just,
I don't get it.
I don't know, it's just my everyday life, so I just do it. I do, like, if I'm laying in bed at night, like, I have trouble getting to sleep because I can see, like, lists of things I need to do. And in order to make them go away, I have to go write them down.
That's actually one of the questions. Do you fall asleep easily, like quickly, or
No.
is it harder to fall asleep?
Harder to fall asleep. Because I think I'm being almost visually stimulated when like even my eyes are closed. I can't shut it out.
Yeah, I feel like for me, that voice is just constantly talking, and that makes it also very difficult to sleep. And that's why I feel like a lot of people that are in my situation also think that, like, they wish they could shut it off, and they're kind of jealous of your situation. But then again, we don't know what's going on in your head at all, so it could be even worse. So
I feel like the conversations you're probably having in your head are what I'm seeing in my head.
Yeah. Do you get anxiety?
Yeah. I tend to have really physical symptoms of anxiety. So it's less, I think, of a mental, like, I don't really feel like I am anxious until I realize that, like, my hands are shaking or I feel really nauseated or kind of more like physical symptoms of anxiety.
A bunch of people actually messaged me, and they said that most of the people that don't have this internal monologue are bilingual and speak multiple languages. Do you speak multiple languages, or
no?
Were you just good at, like, high school language, whatever you took?
Yeah, I was really good at high school language. I took 2 languages, and I know a little bit of 2 other languages. So I love language. I actually wanted to go into linguistics at one point in my life.
That's interesting.
I love sentence structure.
If you're on a date, how do you know if you like them or not?
We still feel stuff.
You still feel it?
We still feel.
You're not, like, judging them, like, looking at them and be like, why would they wear that shirt? Or why does he keep talking,
I think
and why won't he shut up?
I think the things that you have in your head are probably more of, like, the like check boxes in my head. So, like, certain things will be like, yep, or like, nope.
I can't do this. When you're typing a sentence, like if you're writing a paper for school, how do you write a sentence if you don't think about, like, how you're going to phrase the words?
Because they connect.
It's
the sentence, so
they connect.
If there's a noun, it's followed by a verb. If there's, and then
but, like,
it's all about the structure and the shape of the sentence. So and also I read my papers aloud, or I'll speak them out loud as I'm typing them, and then I'll go back and I'll change maybe the sentence structure so that fits a better shape. Like, I don't know how to describe the shape of a sentence, but
when I write, I have thoughts, and I write down what I think. So I can't comprehend how you could possibly just make a sentence without having, like I don't know.
I have, like, an outline and a flow of where I want the paper to go. So from start to finish, I know exactly what I'm going to say, but not specifically word for word. I'll just start writing to make it say what I want it to. But I don't have a sentence that I hear in my head as I'm writing it. I just know where I'm starting and where I want it to go. So
I thought this was going to make my life easier and make all of the thinking stop, but this is not helping.
Sorry.
And I apologize if this you guys up even more. What else do we have? Oh, serious question. Have you ever had depression?
Yes.
And how does that manifest? Because I feel like most people that have depression have that little voice in the back of the head that is like just feeding them negative thoughts. So how does it manifest for you?
I'd say again, it was back in high school, but it was much more of a physical kind of. It's more of
like
the physical
fatigue?
symptoms. Yeah, feeling really fatigued, feeling no desire to get up or do anything, feeling no interest in doing anything. So it's not lack of a motivation is like a really poor term for that, but
Less happy emotions, would you say?
yeah,
Is it more an
feeling
emotional thing?
disengaged, disinterested in life.
That makes
General.
sense.
Yeah.
Every time I shower, I relive an argument from like 2007 and I try to win that argument. Do you not do that?
That sounds like a you problem.
It's not. It's unanimous.
No.
So you don't think about like discussions that you've had in the past and how you could have said something different in that situation?
No.
Have you?
I literally did that like last night.
I do it
I do it all the time.
every time I shower. I am constantly just thinking about conversations I've had, maybe some awkward interactions from middle school or
That far back.
just whenever, I don't choose when it comes into my head. It just pops in there and I'm like, I should have said this, but I didn't.
I will say that if I've had a conversation that day, sometimes I'll go back, but it's all out loud. I'll tell myself what I would have done differently, or like I'm a big journaler, so I would write about how that
makes
conversation
sense.
went and how I would do something different.
Okay, well, I don't think we learned anything. I think I'm still spiraling out of control. I don't know where we go from here. She seems okay. I know millions of people that do not feel okay about this situation.